For microscale sensing, light and sound make a great team. Today on Light Matters, we'll show you how sound waves affect optical fibers and how photoacoustics is fighting heart disease. This is Light Matters for November 12th, 2014. I'm Justine Murphy.
And I'm James Lowe. On this week's show, we share another interview in our EDU Spotlight series, and Laura Marshall shares the industry enthusiasm she picked up at this year's Vision Show in Stuttgart, Germany. But first, we look at the role of photoacoustic imaging in combating heart disease and how sound waves interact with optical fibers. Optical fibers with sub-wavelength diameter have produced a new type of Brillouin scattering from surface acoustic waves. This could ultimately guide the development of extremely acute sensors. Researchers from the Femto-ST Institute and the Charles Fabry Laboratory in France made the finding. They heated and stretched optical fibers used in telecommunications that were 125 microns in diameter, and then injected a laser beam into silica microwires. This process produced Brillouin light scattering. The diameter of the sub-wavelength optical fibers is just 1.5 microns, much smaller than the wavelength of the IR light used, making that light extremely confined inside. As it traveled, it very slightly shook the wire and displaced it by a few nanometers. This distortion induced the acoustic wave that traveled along the fiber surface at a velocity of 3,400 meters per second, with a Doppler shift of about 6 gigahertz. The acoustic wave in turn affected the propagation of the light, as part of the light radiation was sent back with a different wavelength in the opposite direction. Since the waves generated by the confinement of the light can travel along the surface of the microfibers, they are sensitive to environmental factors such as temperature, pressure, and ambient gas. These findings could lead to highly sensitive, compact optical sensors for a variety of applications. The work was published in Nature Communications.
Intravascular photoacoustic imaging has joined the fight against heart disease. The technique, developed by a team led by Purdue University, obtains precise 3D images of arterial plaques revealing the presence of carbon-hydrogen bonds that make up lipid molecules, which can cause heart disease. Photoacoustic imaging has allowed the researchers to look at the exact nature of plaque formation in the walls of arteries to determine which ones are at risk of rupturing. The system uses a Raman laser that produces 2,000 near IR pulses per second, which prompts the tissue to heat and expand. It is able to generate pressure waves at the ultrasound frequency that can be picked up with a transducer device, a process that does not damage tissue. The technique is well suited for diagnostic applications, as it does not require samples to be marked with dyes and is small enough for use in endoscopy. This study was conducted on intact pig tissue. The researchers hope to expand this with live animals and ultimately in clinical studies with humans. The research was published in Scientific Reports. And for more biophotonics news, see the November issue of Biophotonics. You can subscribe online at photonics.com.
Still ahead on Light Matters, the Vision Show in Stuttgart and an EDU Spotlight.
After the show, check out the expanded resources for students, educators, and everyone at edu.photonics.com.
To get the best results in laser machining, you need good information about how your beam interacts with the material. Queen's University master's student Christopher Galbraith presented some of his team's work on this problem at ICALIO in San Diego. I spoke with him for this week's EDU Spotlight.
So I work on an imaging technology for laser machining called inline coherent imaging. The goal is to monitor depth of machining in various different stochastic machining processes. So when we think about a laser cutting into a material, the point at which it makes contact with the material is very well defined, but the depth to which it propagates is at the mercy of that material, and if that material is heterogeneous or if there is a bit of randomness involved in the machining process, it can be very difficult to predict how deep the laser is going to penetrate into the workpiece beforehand. Our technology lets us measure the depth of penetration at high speed with high resolution and control those kinds of processes.
The energy on the show floor was electric at Vision 2014 in Stuttgart last week. The event was the first in the trade fair's biennial cycle, and it was bustling and productive, a bright reflection on the state of the industry. Booths were overflowing with meetings, demonstrations, and even entertainment. It was almost a party atmosphere at times, a far cry from industry events a few years ago when companies were serious and cautious, even wary. And what's not to celebrate? I spoke with more than 25 company reps, from startups to the bigger players, offering technologies from cameras and image sensors to processing systems, frame grabbers, optics, and illumination. And all of them had great things to say about the vision industry and where it's going. The industrial segment was out in full force, but many of the companies I saw were also branching out into less traditional applications for machine vision, such as traffic control and biomedical therapies. One especially interesting discussion took place at a Q&A panel on the future of embedded, PC, and cloud data processing for machine vision.
For industrial production, the terms embedded, PC, and cloud stand for technologies which are crucial to the intelligent interaction of systems and components in even more efficient industrial production processes.
The panelists covered a range of issues, including data security and hardware evolution. Basler AG CEO Dr. Dietmar Ley noted that, as for the future, there will always be big risks associated with change in technologies and processes, but that the companies who drive the change will benefit the most from it. Overall, it was good to bring back so much optimism from an industry event. As one company rep told me, people have made a complete 180 from the uncertainty the industry felt just a couple of years ago. Attendance numbers at Vision 2014 topped those of 2012 by about 25%, with more than 8,700 attendees from 54 countries. The number of exhibitors rose to a record 432, and more than half of those came from outside Germany.
That's it for this week's show.
Email us with your questions or comments at lightmatters@photonics.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and now Google+ for updates every day.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. He's hard to... Right, exactly. Oh, see?